Ladies in Hating by Alexandra Vasti. This is technically the third in a series, but not really. It's one of those companion series where the main characters know each other, but it's just a standalone. You don't have to read the others to read this one. And I think this is the only sapphic one in the series so far. I did really like it though. Not a perfect book, but a lot here to enjoy, especially if you're into the genre, which I feel like I am. I feel like I'm getting into this sort of cozy, historical, wish fulfillment sapphic romance. I've always associated historical romance, especially in a sapphic context, with being boring and sad. Because let's be real, history was boring and sad for a lot of queer people, but also not entirely. I'm sure there were happy queer people, but you don't hear about them, and you weren't allowed to hear about them for a long time, and they weren't allowed to tell you about themselves for a long time. But I feel like now we're in the stage of cozy historical period pieces. I'm thinking of things like Joanna Lowell, whose work I've really liked, and now I also liked this. I really like the writing style, and the wish fulfillment aspects of this are definitely there. A lot of these people are gay. One of these characters has a bisexual dad, and so she's allowed to come out to her family. They have queer friends, they have queer circles. And there's like a mystery here that involves like some even older gay people and like historical records of love letters between two women, and there's like possibly a lesbian ghost here. And so like the wish fulfillment is absolutely there. But I like that because it's more enjoyable than just old-timey people being sad. So I'm into it. Even if it's not the most realistic, it's more fun than a realistic historical novel for me. Because I'm not someone who's ever liked historical novels, but I think I'm starting to enjoy this new genre cropping up. Unless it's been here forever and I just wasn't paying attention because I don't like to read historical novels that much. But to get into the description, I'm trying to get better at really short summaries. Like my one sentence summary for this would be, it's about two Gothic novelists who are rivals who end up in the same haunted manor to research their next books. And then they fall in love. At least that's what the first half of this book is about. Okay, so that's the short version. And if that sounds cool, you'll mostly like this, because I thought that sounded really cool, and I mostly like this. The long version, we have Georgiana, who's a lady. She comes from a higher class family. We're in the Regency area, if that means anything to you. It doesn't mean anything to me. Regency, Victorian, Georgian, Edwardian, all the same. All exactly the same to me. I don't know the difference, but it is a Regency romance, if that means something to you. She's a lady, but she is estranged from her lord of a father because she's a Gothic novelist. She writes under a pen name, but it got out that it was her, and it's like a disgrace to the family. And also her father was abusive and terrible, and so she's an outcast, but still from a good family and respected in some way. And she writes these Gothic novels, and there is another person under a pen name writing Gothic novels that are very similar to hers. And she is convinced that something sketchy is happening. Someone is giving away her ideas, someone is stealing her ideas. Then we find out that the second novelist is a woman named Cat Lacey, Cat Rose Lacey, who was actually the daughter of the butler that Georgiana's family used to have before he got fired and before Georgiana had to leave. So these two women grew up together, and a lot of the similarities in their books stem from the fact that they're both recounting events or people from their childhood. And so there's just a lot of coincidental overlap, which it's like really coincidental that this many things would be the same. And like that they're drawing inspiration from the exact same people, even though it's just like random maids they knew. And so like it's a little much, to the point where I actually thought there would be a reveal that no, there is something fishy happening, but we get both of these characters' perspectives, and therefore we know that neither of them are stealing from each other, and this is just a complete coincidence, which is kind of unfortunate, maybe? I don't know. I sort of liked that initial mystery element of what is going on here, and like trying to figure that out. That was the most compelling mystery in this story for me. But I also did like that these two women figure out who each other are really early on, and like they know who their rival is. But also, Georgiana used to have a crush on Kat when they were like 15, when they were kids. And so Kat was sort of Georgiana's queer awakening. And now she's very conflicted because she's like, oh, this Lady Darling woman, that's Kat's pen name. she stole my books, but also I do have a crush on her, and I do really like her, actually. And then they both end up staying at this newly opened haunted manor that is allowing guests, tourists, to come stay there for a while. They both know someone who knows, like, the owner of the house. So they both come here to write their books, and they're both surprised that the other ones come here. But they should be surprised because they're just on the exact same path in life. They're so parallel. They have all the same ideas and inspiration, so of course they're both wanting to write a book about this haunted house. They end up here and they try to avoid each other. They try to do a thing where, like, I'll take this half of the house and I'll research this half of the house. And, like, we'll do different things. We won't interact. One of them proposes that they do interact and they share a manuscript so they can make sure that nothing is fishy and looks copied and that they aren't just selling the same book. So they try to avoid each other. They try to do, like, a strange business transaction kind of relationship here. But of course they end up spending more and more time together, and it eventually progresses into a sexual at first and then romantic relationship. This does have some spice in it, which is pretty good. The build-up's pretty nice. I do like their relationship. I do like the history they have with each other. I like the rivals to lovers element. There are a couple of annoying little tropes that I just didn't like here. There's a point where they kiss, and Kat's like, oh, she doesn't like me. And I'm like, you just made out, girl. It's that thing where you're, like, insecure, and it's like, oh, of course she won't really want me. Girl, she just made out with you. And then Georgiana has this thing, because she grew up in an abusive household, where she thinks that anything that goes wrong in any of her friends' or her family's life is her fault. And so she has this annoying trait where she's like, I can't get close to anybody because I'm bad for them. And, you know, something terrible happens to everyone I love, and so I just won't love anybody, which is annoying. And provides a bunch of miscommunication-esque kind of scenarios where she gets kind of cold to Kat, and Kat's like, no, I've done this before, where I've been with women who won't admit their feelings, don't want to have me as a serious partner, and just want to sleep around and have a little secret affair. And I don't want that. I want you to be present with me. Like, I want a girlfriend. I want a relationship. And Georgiana at first is like, yeah, that's fine, I'm into that. And then she's like, no, I cannot love anyone. And then they kind of get back together again, and then she's like, no, I cannot love anyone. And it's a little annoying at some points. But you kind of understand where she's coming from, because she did have an abusive father. But, like, it's still a little bit annoying. And you're like, girl, get your shit together. Which, I mean, she does. That's the point of the book. But it's still, like, annoying a little bit to read about sometimes. I think the back half of this novel also falls flat in terms of plot. As soon as these characters get together, the whole, like, novel idea of this novel just kind of goes on the back burner, and they barely talk about writing ever again. And they don't really talk about their careers and how, like, they're going to intersect or run parallel, or, like, how they're going to navigate both of them being writers in this relationship. And, like, I think they end up having, like, the same publisher, and, like, they don't really ever talk about that once they get together, because I guess the initial conflict was just, is someone stealing my ideas? No. Therefore, we don't ever have to think about writing books again, even though that's our career. There's a mystery in the last half of this novel that is significantly less interesting than the romance here, and, like, that initial conflict of the romance and them getting together. It turns into, like, a story about their brothers. Kat's brother was adopted, and, like, oh no, he's found his real father, and something there. I don't want to spoil everything. And Georgiana has a brother that she hasn't seen in years because she left her abusive father. But I think, is her father dead now? I don't know. Her brother's in charge of her old house, and he's just a really nice dude. And it's like, why were you not talking to your really nice brother? Again, it's the thing where she is convinced that she's going to tear him down, and that her bad reputation as a scandalous novelist is gonna ruin his family and his chance of success with his wife and his new baby. But, like, then we meet the brother, and he's just really nice and glad to have his sister, and it's like, oh, you just could have been talking to him this whole time, I'm gonna be honest. And then there's a mystery with the house, and like who owns the house and who gets to inherit the house, and also is there a ghost in this house. And we find like old journals of this woman who, this is spoilers, this is like late stage spoilers, so I don't know why I'm spoiling some things but not others, but we get journals from this woman who was a lesbian, let's be honest. And then they find like this secret garden attached to the house that was like built in memorial for someone, and we don't know who this person is and how they're connected to this family, and they're trying to do research to figure out how this beautiful rose garden got here. And there seems to be possibly some paranormal activity involving it. Some of the house stuff is interesting. I actually wasn't as compelled by the house as I wanted to be. Like in the first half of this book, I was like, I don't necessarily care about like this house mystery. Like this house isn't calling to me. But I think that was because it didn't actually end up being important, really, for like the last half of the novel even. We just get a bunch of stuff about the brothers. And so even like the mystery of the house isn't the focus when I think it should have been. I think this book would have been better if it had focused entirely on the two women and their writing relationship, and like in the conflict at first, and then in them figuring out how to work together and like be a couple in the back half. And they should have been at this location, at this house, the whole time. About halfway through the book, they leave the house. And so, like, again, you don't care about the house. But if the house had been the one setting for this book, for the most part, except for, like, the very beginning before they get there. But if the house had been the major setting, and their whole relationship was developed over the course of their stay in this house, I think I would have liked that better, and it would have felt tighter. Because it does kind of feel like two different books. Like, the way the plot shifts to not the writing and not even the house where they're staying in the back half. It just feels like two different ideas. Like this author didn't go into this book with a very secure plan of exactly what the arc was going to be in the whole plot arc. And I just wasn't compelled by the back half as much as I was the first half. And I feel like my opinion of this book will dip a little bit over time in my memory, because I feel like I'm gonna remember the plot points that I didn't like, or the sort of writing structure of like, why did we shift that way? Why was the focus so different in the second half than in the first half? I feel like that's the stuff I'm gonna remember, and it's gonna dip my opinion a bit. But while reading this book, I actually did still enjoy all of that. Even though the back half plot wasn't the most compelling of the plots for me, I was still enjoying it because this writing is actually really good. The prose really carries this, and it's very solid. It's very atmospheric. It has that historical sort of tone, but without being inaccessible or too dense or too like wordy and archaic and like not interpretable. This author really nails that accessible, historical, cozy kind of tone, and it's also really funny and disarmingly funny. There will be a little joke snuck in when you don't even expect it, and it'll make you chuckle. I think there's really great use of adjectives and verbs and like phrasing. There were so many little turns of phrase here that I just found charming. The way she talks about fondling her dog's ear. She has a dog named Sir Francis Bacon, which is really cute and adds to like the cozy tone. The dog's just really cute. She talks about the bird squawking, but instead of the bird squawks, it's like we hear distressed avian noises, and it's just got like a charm and a way of conveying an idea to you that isn't typical or isn't the most straightforward. There's a layer of artistic flair here and like tonal flair that's really, really nice to read and just enjoyable. That makes me think this is a good author, even if I don't think the plot structure was the best or the most thought out or the most expert. I can tell that this is a talented writer, at least on a prose level, and for the most part the plot's fine. You don't hate the plot, but if you think about it after the fact, you're like, yeah, that wasn't the best, that could have connected clearer, it could have been more focused. But in the moment, while you're reading the book, you're still enjoying it. And the writing was so good that I do feel comfortable recommending the author's other books if you're into that, if you're into this historical genre. I don't know like how tight the plot will be, but I think the writing at least will be so solid that it will carry even a lesser plot. They might not be your favorite books of all time, but I think you will enjoy them. And they're good in the moment. So I would probably give this, I was going to give it like 4 stars. I think I'll bump it down to like a 3.75. Maybe over time it'll end up in like a 3.5 range. But it's still solid. It's enjoyable. Not perfect, but really fun. And just a good, cozy romance, if that's what you're looking for.